Yeah. So my goal here was to create a podcast that got I don't know, some attention from the title because it's a very important
Yeah.
topic, but how to have better conversations isn't necessarily catchy enough.
So
And
you were trying to think of some.
we
You were
live in
trying
a
to think
world
of
where it's like
clickbait,
the
right?
three weird things you need to know about having a good conversation,
There we go.
or the one thing you're doing wrong. And so you always have to speak in the negative when you're
Uh,
doing useful conversations. And I hate that
but
about the
hold on,
multimedia
hold
world.
on. Being bad at clickbait is not a bad thing. It's okay.
I know. I want to say, hey, here's some great tips on how to have better conversations with clients, and no one will talk about that. But
Yeah,
if I say what you're doing wrong with your clients, all of a sudden you have 100,000 hits,
I
and
know.
it's
Yeah. So
oh.
we're
So
awful. Yeah.
yeah, so this particular podcast, PowerPoint costs you clients, also known as how to have better conversations, or what Skip and I like to say, have conversations, not presentations.
Yes.
And the for those of you in the managed services community, you've heard us talk about it a lot about how you walk into these rooms and you give this lecture and then you walk out and wonder why no one bought your stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And the presentation aspect, I really pull on a lot of experience for this, and I do remember very distinctly a time when I put a lot of effort into some of these. We didn't call them QBRs back then, but it was that type of report. It was an update sort of engagement with a client, and I wanted it to be valuable. All right, I'm not trying to just smoke and mirror my clients. All right, I really want to be valuable, and so we would start pulling information from our reporting tools, our ticketing systems. We would bring this in. I had pivot tables and spreadsheets. We had okay, dating myself again here a little bit, which I tend to do. We had this really snazzy color laser printer that used to not be a thing for everybody. Okay, and so we had this color laser printer that would really, I mean, production quality make some very snazzy looking documents. And so we put all this together. We even had the little binding machine. So those annoying little kind of plastic spring loaded, spines that you could put on stuff. So we had this whole deal. We would spend hours and hours putting together all this sexy data. And it was useless, Either the clients read the report and I looked at the top of their heads during the whole meeting, or and that was kind of the worst case scenario. Or the better case scenario was we tossed the whole report to the side and we had a meaningful conversation eye to eye, which really, is a little anticlimactic because it wasted all the effort and energy that we put into those reports. So we really need to move out of this mindset. And yes, this conversations, not presentations, is this little tag that I try to make a current, and a constant thread in everything that we're trying to do today.
Yeah, and we talk about that in like sales calls and in member calls where we say either you get it or you don't. We would like to
Hmm.
convince people to get it, but it has to be something that
Yes.
you yourself
Yeah.
understand that I am tired of talking and not being listened to. And um, it's kind of our platform's unique value add is the fact that we are interested in having more conversations with our clients. And I can't tell you how many times I get emails, probably about once a week or so, from a prospective client that says, how do I automate my QBR process?
Yes. Yes.
And it's like, that's an executive function. You don't want to automate it. And if you do, you're probably not a good fit for us. We want you to have more quality conversations that lead to better sales and better alignment with your customers because you're actually empowering them. And that is what you're aiming for. And if you do a PowerPoint presentation, you're not leaving room for that discussion. And you're doing it wrong when you have to, in your meeting agenda, say, okay, allow the client to talk here.
Yep.
So you're giving your
I've
client,
done that. I've done that.
we all have. We all have. We're giving our client permission to speak at their own office. Think
Uh-huh.
about Think about that just for a second, people. Go to their office. You're in their boardroom and you're giving them time to speak. If they're lucky. Because we
If they're
all we
lucky.
all end up going over.
Oh,
And
yes.
so, um, what if instead you said, "Hey, we're gonna walk into this room and have a conversation." What would that look like to have an hour-long conversation with a client and empowering each other to come up with a great solution that you're all agreed upon working with by the end of the meeting? What does that look like? We've been in those conversations, but they kind of happen rarely because we're not deliberate about it. We're too busy pulling up a PowerPoint that is static. You can't negotiate with a PowerPoint. It's not built to be dynamic.
Right.
Yeah, sure, you can call it dynamic because you have a couple animations going on, or maybe
Yeah.
you have a cool transition between your slides. That's not dynamic.
No, it is a
Dynamic,
powerful presentation tool.
exactly. If you're
Yep.
going to go up and give a sermon, if you're going to teach a classroom, a lecture of 60 people,
Uh-huh.
great. Use a PowerPoint. You can give them the slides ahead of time and you don't even have to show up probably.
Yeah, they're really good PowerPoints. You don't have to show up. It's so awesome. People can just follow along with
Most
the plays.
most people running a PowerPoint might as well be a marionette up there.
Yes.
They're going to say the exact same things they could say on a video. It's like the ultimate 3D video. I know exactly what you're going to say as soon as you walk on that stage. Nothing will be a surprise because you have canned it all. And it's great because you have this feeling of value because you put together this really pretty thing that you can talk about for an hour and you look good. It's like you're wearing this giant shiny suit. But are you communicating with your client if you're using something that is a static presentation?
Yes. So
And so
I've got a great example of this. So, and this is something I think a lot of our listeners can relate to, no matter what industry you're in. You're in industry and you have a vendor, a big nationwide, maybe worldwide vendor. They've got, lots and lots of resources, marketing, research, all this kind of stuff. And they'll send out a sales rep, someone, for your geography or a product specialist, whatever. And this person shows up and they pull out the mother of all PowerPoints, right? It maybe it's not, just a ton of slides, but the quality in those, the graphics are sharp. It's specific. There's animation. It is just so, so cool. And this person who came out with a PowerPoint, they started last week. They don't know up from down, and they're trying to muddle their way through it. And through the whole engagement, you're sitting there with your client and this vendor, and you're going, wow, if they would have just sent me this PowerPoint, I could have done 10 times better. And it was all about the PowerPoint and the data that was in it. And very little of it was about the engagement, actually, the conversation that you need to have with your clients.
yeah, what are you going to learn from them? And so that art has been lost in conversation in general. And I largely blame the school system and standardized schooling for this. Don't get me wrong, I love our schools. I love our educators out there. But we have conditioned ourselves over centuries to listen
Yep.
and not to communicate. So we go to a classroom and we spend our 12 to 15 years sitting there going, yes, yes. Let me take some more notes. Yes. And the discussion doesn't occur. And even in a collegiate setting, you're still sitting in a room facing forward with somebody at the front. And it used to be you had a chalkboard where you shared ideas and you wrote things down and you communicated and you made lists and you worked together as a room. But as the rooms got bigger, as the ratios became bigger, then all of a
They
sudden
increased the number of chalkboards.
needed to find somewhere more efficient at I need to tell people all these important things. Like, no, you don't. You need to discuss with them so they understand the important things. And when you use PowerPoint, like it just crushes your ability to communicate. It makes you look good, but it has nothing to do with the recipient of what you have to say. And it does not include what they have to say. So something I desperately want people to know is that um, that I desperately want people to know is that it's about having a conversation, not about you telling them what they need to know. So what you have is a conversation with your client that pushes an agenda that you create together. Imagine working on this PowerPoint with your client, so to speak. Imagine if you two came up with what are you going to talk about together? That's where you want to aim for. So when you're in a conversation and you whip out a whiteboard or a chalkboard for that matter, imagine finding a chalkboard today,
Yep.
and you go up on the chalkboard. You say, "All right, today we really need to walk away from this conversation with how are we going to solve the VoIP problem at this workplace? You guys are dropping calls every once in a while. They're not being routed properly. So let's talk it through. Let's discuss what we know. Let's discuss what you guys know and figure out what the outcome is going to be."
Right.
And so,
And talking that through is really important. So, I seem to be very experience driven. So I've always got some old man story, right? But it doesn't really matter. Some of you guys have been, our listeners, somebody out there been in business for a year even. And if you think back to your best engagements, the meetings that you walked away from and went, wow, that was really, really good. I can virtually guarantee you it's because you had a conversation with your client. You talked through something and you worked something out. And it probably had very, very little to do with the material that you showed up. And you're probably very likely to be surprised that the meeting went so well because you had so little information to show up with. I think that's probably something that a lot of people can relate to. So we really do have to focus on this communicating with our clients.
yeah. And you think about when have you had the best conversations with clients? And all of you in your head are thinking the same things. Well, over a beer or at lunch.
Yep. Yep.
And so we then as vendors, we try to force this idea that we need to have more lunches with our clients. Oh, we need to structure those lunches so that we have appropriate conversation. Ah, you just killed it.
Yeah. That's it. That's it.
We're trying to
Yep.
force conversations, and there are ways to do that. There are great ways to craft a conversation so it stays on topic, but
Yes.
it has very little to do with having slides that force conversation away. They say, "Oh,
Yes.
here's I have all the information you need to know here. Just read it." But over a beer, you're having natural conversation, and if you get a good conversationalist in that circle that is kind of managing the conversation and keeping things flowing, some people are just naturally good at that, and you'll find that, oh wow, we got a lot done over a beer. And you're like, how can we not have meetings like this? But if you walk into a boardroom, all of a sudden all the conversation dies because you
Uh-huh.
forgot about the idea that we need to converse together, that we need to come up with a solution together. Why? Because you've handed out your agenda. This is what we're going to talk about. This is the lecture you're going to get today. And then we're going to walk out of here.
Yes. Yes.
What's the
Now,
difference between your meetings today and a YouTube video?
there we go.
There's a
Now,
reason why I
that's
don't go
not,
to conferences anymore.
and that's not to say that you can't create a methodology for this. You can't kind of template what you do. So
That's
I
the
worked. Okay,
difference.
so I got to do the story again. So I worked with an MSP owner for many years, and he had this little process that he would go through. And I learned to be quiet when he started on this because I knew good stuff was to follow. And he would start out with a very standard question. Many of you have maybe used this before. And he would start out with talking owner to owner, right? So this is the context of the conversation. He would start out with, what keeps you up at night? And so he's asking someone else this, another owner. And I knew, he was kind of starting his thing there. And so I would let him run with that. But the good part about that was it was a conversation. He was asking another owner of a business something very relevant, something very meaningful to them. And they had a great conversation, a great discussion that came from that. So it's not all ad hoc. We're not saying that at all. You can have a plan. You can be prepared when you show up these, but your focus needs to be being prepared to have a conversation, planning to talk with your clients, not talk to your clients.
Yeah, and that's what we say all the time. talk with them, have a conversation with them,
Yes.
break out of your habit of lecturing. And even as a parent, we sit there and we give our kids lectures and
Mm-hmm.
we don't stop
Mm-hmm.
and ask their opinion or allow the conversation to happen because we're just trained to do it that way. Our parents yelled at us, we yelled at our kids, and then the chain continues.
It does.
You know, and same
Yeah.
thing with workplaces. We think that a professional meeting is somebody talking to a group and everybody paying homage to the speaker. That is not how things go. It is the lazy thing to do things. Now, you take somebody who's an expert in their field. Let's say you're the best firewall admin in your town. Go into a room and say, we're going to talk about firewalls today. And see who shows up and give them a whiteboard marker and say, we're going to discuss the future of firewalls. What does everybody think the future of firewalls are? And then that firewall person will sit there and will craft the conversation and add to it and take opinions from people and write on the board. They
Yes.
think that
Yeah.
their job is not to tell people what to think, but rather take their internal knowledge as a guru in the field and craft a conversation and put things in the right places so that as ideas are shared, they're connecting them. So in the end, you have this group think that comes out of it. Now, what does this mean for like vendors? When you walk into a room and you want to sell the latest and greatest shiny firewall because you got great margins on it, ask yourself, how is this going to help my client? Ask them, like, what are their biggest problems? Rather than trying to sell the firewall, why not go in and ask the client what their biggest problems are? Hey, let's have a conversation. We really need to learn about you guys and what your biggest frustrations are and what your biggest opportunities are, and you're kind of doing a mini SWOT exercise at that point. But the thing is, you need to have a board or a piece of paper open, or a Google Doc, or Word doc open, where you're taking notes and you're putting things together. The best
Yes.
way to do this is with something you can actually draw, where you can draw lines between things and connect ideas, because then your client feels validated. They feel like they're being heard and they feel like they're in control. And that's a good thing. And that's a conversation because you're facilitating their ideas and you're filling in the gaps in knowledge. So when they're like, "Oh, I don't know why it is that when I get a VoIP call, it's choppy sometimes, or it sounds like a robot. And it's really frustrating." And then you have your engineer going, "Oh, well, that's usually because of blah, blah, blah."
Yeah.
And then you write that down on the board, like, concerns over choppy lines. And so, like, well, what do I do about my presentation with we've had that conversation and now we need to bill them. Okay, well at that point it should be a no-brainer. Hey, we'll send you an invoice at the end of the day. This is what it's going to be. So even then, it's not a presentation. We're going to sit there for an hour and explain to them why you're billing them $15,000 a month. It's a You've already had this conversation. Here's the solution. You're already in the ballpark. It's not a surprise to anybody, and they just sign off on it.
Right. Because you're not billing them for a piece of hardware. You're billing them for a solution that makes their business better. They can sign off on that. If you're just selling them hardware, that's just stuff they're going to stack up. And unless they love tech and they like the blinky lights,
And some people do.
yes, and some people do. For the most part, they really don't care. What tech it is, what brand it is. Is it some big name brand or is it not? They're really interested in what it does for their business. Back to that example I had about the MSP owner that I worked with, and he would ask, what keeps you up at night. We had a challenge because it was always an informal conversation. One of the best conversations that we ever had was standing in the data center,
There you go.
and it was awesome. Now it was a little hard to hear sometimes. I mean, there were so many fans running and all, and um, it just there was so much good information that just ended up floating around in the air. It never got captured. We were never able to really leverage that great information because although it was a great conversation, we didn't have a mechanism. We didn't have a tool. We weren't really prepared to have that engagement with the client. So it has to be both. You have to have a process. You have to have some tools, whatever they are. Yes, managed service platform is a great one. All right, but whatever those tools
Plug.
are, you need those. But the focus can't be on the tool. The focus
Yes.
has to be on the actual conversation.
And I
Maybe it is
really
PowerPoint. Maybe you are awesome at using PowerPoint and you can leverage that in your conversations. That is a great skill set. Knock yourself out. I'm all behind you on that. But if you're leveraging PowerPoint as what you think is going to get the job done, you're putting your resources in the wrong place.
Yeah, and I think that's what we started making as a crutch. When
Mm-hmm.
PowerPoint
Mm-hmm.
started really becoming mainstream around 2000, because like, oh, look at this cool way of presenting. It's really flashy. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing that. And then it became this canned way of forcing conversations. So the reason why PowerPoint is killing you and costing you clients is because it is creating a process where you need to have a framework.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
the idea is, instead of scripting the conversation, which is a process or a procedure, you are looking to craft a framework. Here's the context we're going to discuss while we are on this meeting. So, in this meeting, we're going to talk about solving problems that are facing your business today from a technical standpoint. That is framing out the conversation. And then in there, you can allow for things like Traction has a wonderful tool called 90.io, and it actually frameworks conversations so that you have points where you can say, hey, here, let's talk about our data. Let's talk about our tasks. Let's talk about discussing things. And so you're not scripting the conversation. You're just getting a framework so you can time box what you're doing so you stay
Yeah.
on task.
Yeah.
And then you just need a really good facilitator that can keep people from going, hey, while you're here, let's talk about rainbows. Like, no, no, no. We'll
Yeah.
talk about that after the meeting. Let's talk about what we have on the agenda, which is we really need to put in context. How can we help you? And having that conversation. And that's a simple piece of paper you can put in front of people, or you can email them to them ahead of time, but not saying, here's what we're going to talk about, A, B, C, D, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Here's the slide that goes with that bullet point. Here are the data. You've left no conversation left. It's going to look pretty, and you're going to feel confident because you don't have to talk and you don't have to be creative. And that's what that
Yes.
firewall admin we
Yes.
talked about earlier, because he is a guru. He has to be creative with the conversation and help people understand how to connect the dots. And he can do that because they are a expert. They don't need a PowerPoint to tell them what to say. They just need to know, I got an hour. Here's my discussion time. Here is the things we need to cover and the kind of the direction of the conversation. And that's all you need. And now you have built a conversation that's going to result in more cash because you're aligning with the client's solutions that you're going to provide. Yes, some of your solutions are not sexy. Some of them are going to be, you need to upgrade a firewall because it's
Yes.
out of warranty.
Yes. Yes.
But at that point, you pitch that to them. You've already crafted a conversation where they're talking about, like, hey, you know what? You're going to have some problems coming up along these lines with your VoIP. If we don't upgrade that firewall this year, we can probably squeeze another 6 months out of it if you really need to. But, along the lines of these phone conversations, things are going to get worse. Like, the reason why you're having bad connections with your phones is because of old equipment or because of misconfigured equipment. And we want to make sure we stay on top of it. So are you okay if we just add on a firewall onto this project to help build out our stability in the future? You're done. That 1 minute like spiel I just gave is an entire sales pitch for your firewall. You've already applied the conversation, you've already had the context, and now you're just saying, we also need to do this. Now, if you don't have the cash for it, we need to find some other solutions. But this is part of making your internet more stable for your VoIP system, which is your current concern. And now you can apply the things that you know that they need into their concerns. And now they're like, yes, fine. We need to pay an $8,000 firewall. Let's add that onto the project. We'll move some cash around and make sure this happens because phones are important to us. But if you'd walked in there just with a presentation of why the latest FortiGate firewall is awesome, that's not going to sell them. They don't
Right.
care.
Yeah, and because some of it we are gonna. You're right. We're gonna have to get into the technical weeds, but when your clients feel like you really understand why voice is important, why these phone calls are really important to the business, and the impact that it has on them when things go bad, as well as the impact on them when things go well. When you really understand how that's impacting your clients and your clients understand that you get it, you have the opportunity to say, look, we really, here's, whatever technical detail you can insert in there. This is why we need to do this. We're your technical experts. You're hiring us to be technical experts. We're telling you this will help your bottom line. This will help your efficiency. This will help your reliability. Your clients are going to respond to that because you're communicating back and forth. You're having this conversation, and they feel like they're a part of the solution and not just a customer that's you're trying to sell them stuff.
Yeah, and I want to end this on a analogy. Go to your best car salesman in town, your favorite dealership, and go to buy a car. Watch how these
Mm.
sales guys deal with you.
Yeah.
Do they whip out a PowerPoint on the best truck on the market and show you why you need to buy this truck and why it's the best thing in the world, and you spend an hour sitting there listening to them talk? Or do these guys walk over with a cup of coffee, smile on their face, and say, "Hey, how's it going, sir? What are you looking for today?" And they'll talk to you about your kids. They'll talk to you about your life. They'll talk to you about what you're going to do. And they're getting to know you. They're creating that bond. They're having a great conversation with you. And they're going to be like, what are you looking for today? Putting that context in there. Oh, man, you're looking for a truck? Oh, you want to pull a camper? I got 3 great ones out here. Let's go talk about them. And, what kind of camper are you pulling? What do you like to do when you travel? They're always asking the little questions. Are you doing the same thing? Now, we make fun of used car salesmen. They are good at what they do.
They are.
They know
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
could sell a glass of sand to somebody in the desert,
Yep.
because they got to know the person and they put it in context. You really need to spend an extra $5,000 because you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck out of this F-150 than you would out of that Silverado. And, here is where it's going to give you more horsepower so you can be more confident in towing your camper. And they'll give you the entire context because they know their inventory. They know the margins they have on everything. And
Yeah.
they're good at saying, if you spend this extra cash, you will love it. And they've emotionally sold you. They become your friend. And a good salesman is being honest with you.
Mhm.
They really are trying to line you up with the best truck or the best car because they know you'll buy if you feel like you're getting a good deal and you're getting something that fits you. And in order
Yes.
for them to figure
Yep.
that out, they need to know who you are. So just for a test, if you want to teach your engineers how to be better, tell them, hey, go to your favorite dealership, and I need you to negotiate for a 4-door sedan.
There you go.
And I want you to watch how the salesman deals with you. You need to talk to your clients the same way because it's a conversation, not a presentation about how great firewalls are or about how cars are. It's all about the relationship. And PowerPoint has made us forget that. It's
Yep.
in schools, it's in our business relationships, it's everywhere. You go to a conference and you no longer see the person up there with a whiteboard. Unless Adam Alter is there, you will always get a whiteboard. Not a whiteboard, I will get a piece of paper out and I will wave it in front of the room. You'll see it.
Yeah.
I guarantee if you see Adam Alter at a conference, you will see a drawing, a really, really bad drawing at some point during the lecture. And I will be asking questions out there. I'm pointing to the crowd. I'm saying, hey, you. And if you give me a bag of t-shirts to give away at that conference, I guarantee you it'll be gone by the end of my lecture. I don't give them out after the lecture. I give them during to help people have conversations because you people are so used to just listening to people talk that having a dynamic conversation, you walk away going, oh my gosh, that was so refreshing. Your clients feel the
Yes.
same way. You
Yes, they do.
walk in with the used car salesman mentality. You want to create the relationship so you understand what they want so that you can sell them the technology they need.
Yep.
And that is why PowerPoint is costing you clients because you started scripting every conversation, not leaving room for them.
There you go.
And that's all I had to say about that today.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on, Skip.
You
Do
bet.
you have any final thoughts to give everybody?
No, I mean it's exciting when you get into those conversations. I think if you send your engineers, someone out to those car lots, to do what Adam was talking about, it's going to be hilarious because there's going to be the rare case, but there's going to be a few of them that come back, and your engineers are going to go, "Crap! I just bought a car. I wasn't looking for a new car." because they encountered someone that really engaged with them, and led them to a solution that maybe they didn't even know that they needed. So
See, see a need, fill a need.
there we go. It's an exciting deal. It moves us out of a lot of drudgery and just factory work. Our engagements with our clients is not factory work. And so when we kind of liberate ourselves to have these really meaningful conversations, for the right person, and I do know, I mean, there's a lot of engineers out that they want to do the factory kind of work, but for that right skill set, those engagements not only become much more productive, but they're much more happier in their work and what they're doing, and then their productivity increases as well.
Yeah. And I really encourage people, take some time to look at what you enjoy about a conversation. Now, some of us are engineers and we just want to be in our holes, and we don't want to be bothered with people. But learning how to have a conversation, taking PowerPoint out of it and creating a framework for the conversation is so freeing, and you have much better conversations. And when you make all the extra money, throw some my way.
All
Say,
right.
oh, thank you. Here's a bottle of whiskey. I can't believe I wasn't doing that earlier. So upcoming is talk like a CFO and talk like a CEO, context that you can operate in conversation to help you be more relatable to the CFO suite or to the CEO suite. A lot of you can't get CEOs or CFOs to come into your conversation if you paid them, because you are
Yeah.
boring and you aren't talking their language.
Yep.
So these two podcasts that we're going to have coming up are going to teach you some of the tidbits on how to talk in those two contexts and how to get them into the room with you. With that, I'll see everybody later. I'll see you next week, Skip, on the podcast.
Enjoy. See you guys later.